First of all, thank you for coming back. Thank you for tuning in on the first one. We appreciate your feedback and everything on there. We're going to dive a little bit into what emotional intelligence is on this one. On the first one, we went through and broke down self-awareness, talked about that on a physical, a mental, a spiritual, and then most importantly, an emotional basis. That's what leads us into emotional IQ, which is just how you process those things, how you use them, what are emotions, what they do for you, and how can I benefit from having a high emotional intelligence. So we're going to break that down into aspects that will help you, whether it's mentorship, coaching, leadership, management, or even if it's parenting, if it's your relationships, whether those be personal or business, just helps you process things a whole lot better. So this is part 2 of our 4-part series on emotional intelligence. So with the lovely Janita Kennedy.
All right, let's get started. So
in part 1, we learned a lot about the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of our self-awareness, how those sensory systems work so we can better understand self and process everything that is coming to us. Emotions, we feel, serve as like a data feed of sorts. That's your sensory system picking up on things, whether those be conscious or unconsciously. It's you seeing the patterns of things that you observed, the things that you felt previously, kind of pulling in on some of your previous experiences. And that gives you a feeling, as most people describe, about things. And those are generally based on emotions or how you feel about a certain thing, as most would say. So how do you handle those? How do you use those for your benefit? I guess kind of starting with, what are emotions? That's where we kind of left off at. What do you feel those are to you, Janita?
Oh, geez, emotions. That's a little bit of a tough one, because emotions, like you said, it's something you feel. To me, is I have explained it as a tool to navigate what is, what my body's trying to tell me.
Yep.
Right. So for me, it's basically just a tool to help me understand self, other people, or the environment, or the situation, the mood. It tells a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and your emotions can tell a lot about you as well. I mean, all of us know people that are described almost as part of their identity, what their primary emotion is. If somebody is happy or if they're angry, if they're always a certain way. I mean, it becomes part of your identity where people describe you as that even. So I think being mindful of that and how you perceive stuff or how others perceive you really goes into that emotional intelligence, into that EQ that really, like I said, becomes part of our identity, because that's usually how we respond to things.
And not only that, but it helps you tell the truth about you. And so when I say that, it helps people understand how you are feeling, what state you are in, if you're angry, if you're sad. So it tells a truth about you.
Yeah, yep, it helps expose you. And so therefore, if you have an emotional intelligence, you can therefore influence yourself, if you're self-aware of it, then how you're responding things, and actually even change the perception or the image of how people view you.
Mm-hmm. And exposing you in a good way, right?
Yeah,
like in a truthful way, to where if somebody doesn't really understand the underlying feeling, how do they know how to guide you or cater to you or sympathize or empathize with you?
Right.
Right? So it's a good, to be vulnerable, I guess, is what we're saying also, is to really understand what you are feeling, and be truthful in that way.
Right. And if you have a high emotional intelligence, I mean, one of the ways that you can benefit from there is you're not as emotionally controlled. I mean, every one of us has been in a situation where you've made an emotionally charged decision, and it probably didn't go the way that you had intended it to go. And you're left feeling after the fact, a different way. But what if you had the ability to kind of slow that down so that it didn't just kind of rear up, and get yourself into trouble or so? There's some instances where being reactive or being, using your intuition, it comes out authentic and comes out genuine. But sometimes we let things affect us that really alter, our perception of a situation, and then it's kind of left us feeling after the fact a little bit like, ooh, that didn't go so well, or I would have responded or done a little bit differently. So we're left kind of reeling and
or
apologizing.
or the situation just becomes worse.
Right. Yeah. Add fuel to that fire. So, in that, I guess you have better situational awareness, situational discernment in things, whether that be business or personal. Also, it helps with some social skills. I mean, if you have a higher emotional intelligence, it'll help with some of your social skills. You'll be aware of some of the verbal and nonverbal cues, because we've all dealt with some people that were relatively clueless in conversations and end up saying some inappropriate things or saying some things at the wrong time. And so that also can get us into trouble where we don't have that discernment, sometimes referred to as that filter.
Yeah. So I think, with emotional IQ, I think the first thing, like, as always, is to start with self, like you said, the self-awareness.
Absolutely.
And that helps you know your strengths, your limits, and your triggers. And so when you understand that, your own emotions, you can understand your thoughts at that point and your behavior. You get to choose how you react, how you think about the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So an emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and understand and manage one's own emotions so that you can effectively use them to better your situation or someone else's. And that's what will lead us into empathy towards the end of this segment, which is ultimately what your understanding is. If you're self-aware and then you're understanding your emotions and have an emotional IQ as far as how to break those down, use those to your benefits, use those so that you can advance or help your situation or help others, that's where you can be impactful. Like I said, to help you with social skills, help you with leadership skills, knowing your people, but also how you can effectively, communicate your truth, and so that people have the right identity or the right view of you and how you conduct yourself. It'll help you be way more composed. I really look for employees that have a high emotional IQ, only because with that, I mean, it really helps them navigate in their role of working and managing people, because they're able to manage their emotions, their self, and so therefore that transfers over to the people that they influence.
Mm-hmm. And one way to help you improve on your self-awareness, you can set aside time to do a little, self-reflection.
Yeah.
Why
absolutely.
did I get upset? Why did I get upset in this? Or, why did I handle this situation in this way? Why did it make me feel this way? Yeah. And so when you go a little bit deeper with self, for me, I go about this with the parenting aspect, is when a child comes to me and I am frustrated, instead of yelling at them, I have to take a step back and let them know I am actually tired. I'm not frustrated with them. I'm just simply tired. And so they get a sort of, they empathize with that. They're like, okay, well, you know what, mom's tired. She's not really mad at me. So it's not a projection or they're the blame of my frustration.
Yeah, my mom must have been tired a lot when I was younger.
It's just, I'm tired. So, really self-reflecting and understanding your emotions in that way. Your mom is yes. And there is, such thing as like primary feelings, and then after that there's subcategories of that feeling, and then it goes a little bit deeper. So it's really, I'll have to share that. It's called a feeling wheel. I'm sorry, emotional wheel.
And how that breaks down.
And so once you start understanding the self part, you can better. And the next, one we're going to talk about is self-regulation.
Yeah.
How to self-regulate that emotion that you're feeling. So once you identify it, we understand how to regulate or how to manage it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So one of the things is, so we've talked a little bit about emotional intelligence, what that is, what emotions are, and how it can benefit from it. What are some signs then that you look for that show that somebody has a high emotional intelligence or a low emotional intelligence? When I start talking about some of the low emotional intelligence, you'll be able to put those labels kind of on people that you've experienced or had interactions with in your life. But some of the most telltale signs of somebody having a low emotional intelligence is they're typically bullies. They're super highly controlling. They're very passive aggressive. Those people generally lack accountability. They're forever blaming outwardly, pointing at somebody else, not accepting, the view of they have fault in things. And they generally have an improper view of self. They think they're better than or greater than, what they actually are. They're usually, I identify them as when I go into a room, they're generally the loudest and the most obnoxious in the room. That's one of the things that kind of points them out.
And what we said on the last episode is they're self-centered.
They're more self-centered than a centered self, and how they conduct themselves. But with that, how you work with those people, is just you being hyper aware, having to compensate for some of those things and then actually demonstrate it. To become more aware of yourself, one of those things that we do is a lot of introspection and reflection. That's where Janita was talking about after you have a situation, thinking back on how that went, how that affected you, how you felt about it. That way then you can prevent those kind of feelings from overwhelming or taking you over again next time you're faced with that situation. But shifting your mindset, becoming more positive in your self-talk. And when you're doing that reflection, doing that introspection, actually breaking it down in a constructive manner, talking to yourself as you wish you would have. With that, take responsibility for your life and actions. Stop blaming outwardly. I mean, if it's, as we've said in a lot of our segments, you're in control of your attitude and your reaction. The rest of everything else is pretty much stimulus. If you're analyzing and assessing, reflecting, doing introspection on your attitude and your reaction, and therefore that's what controls your behavior, you're already creating that self-accountability. And if you hold yourself accountable to those standards and you don't let those things overwhelm you, I mean, you will get to your goals. You'll work towards bettering your situation and others and not be responsive to stuff where, like I said before, it can blow things out of proportion.
So how to improve with self-regulation. And like you said, take responsibility, right, for your actions. Instead of blaming others, what you did. So you have the choice to behave in a certain way. And so if you go on and start projecting and just, lash out, that's not self-regulating. You have to take accountable, for your action, how you react. And the other thing is, what is your personal values? So in a situation, when it comes to family, do you want a happy home? If that's what you value, you are going to regulate yourself a little bit better because you're adding to that value or not, right?
Yep.
How are you adding to it? By just exploding? No, you're not adding to it. So if you're self-regulating, you're adding to that happy home. You know what I mean? A nice, or to raise whatever your goal is, your value.
Yep.
And in a job situation, it would be, I want this to be a good workplace, or, striving for that bonus.
Yeah, and getting teams, to collaborate and everything else. It's, when I look for employees that have a high emotional intelligence, those employees are better able to handle pressure. With the business that we're in, it is a lot of pressure to perform. It's day in, day out, week in, week out, and we have 12 races in a calendar year. It's month to month. It's there is a lot of pressure. You're dealing with public, you're dealing with different people and personalities. So it also helps them with better decision making. If they can handle that pressure, they make better decisions under pressure. And they're not ruled by emotions, where we talked about, the benefit of it is you're not emotionally controlled. You're not making some of those snap decisions because you felt a certain way. You're able to discern that situation a little bit differently and break it down to what makes sense, overall for the business, for the people that are affected by the scenario. They tend to be a lot more motivated. They are more self-starting. They will go after a project. They are more forward thinking. So they're more motivated because they are self-assessing in that. And when it comes down to it, if there is a situation that we have to discuss where constructive criticism is involved, if there's a situation where there is conflict, they handle that a whole lot better because they do better at taking their emotions out of the situation. It's hard for us, in just human interaction to not feel emotions about something, or to feel a connectedness about something. And so therefore it's easy for people to get defensive or get frustrated. And if they are able to have, like I said, that discernment and be self-regulating in it, they don't let that overwhelm them and take over that situation.
Yeah. And I like how you said, changing your mind shift or your mindset,
Yeah.
shift it to, what is find a way to get to your calm and collective state, whether that be, going to a room, taking deep breath, sitting, getting into a car, collect your thoughts, everything, calm yourself down, and then go about it that way. The more you do that, you don't really have to go to these, places. You can just do it in the moment.
Yeah.
Just take a deep breath and be like, I've already, dealt with this,
Yep.
and I'm going to deal with it this way.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good way of looking at it. So with the team building, like you mentioned, that's, when you have higher emotional intelligence, your social skills improve dramatically.
Yeah.
Because at that point, so you start with, yourself, right? Your self-awareness, then you start to self-regulate. And then after that, you are better in a more public and team environment, because now you're understanding how they are feeling, how they regulate their behaviors or they don't regulate their behaviors.
Yeah.
So you know how to build with them, you know how to motivate them, you know how to speak with them and talk with them. And then, walk them through their own emotions, because, they might be feeling frustrated. But like I said, little do they know they're more tired than anything.
Right. Yep.
And
No,
so, then it comes into social skills and it helps in that way.
Yeah, and somebody that is, very emotionally controlled or has a low emotional IQ is somebody that would be very reactive when you bring them things, whether good, bad, or otherwise. So, yeah, it's one of those things that with our employees, when they're able to take their emotions out of the equation, they're better able to assess what is going on, what the bigger picture is. They're able to go through those probing questions that we always ask, which is the who, what, where, why, when, and how. That helps you break down where that stimulus is coming from. Ask yourself why, which is something that we train a lot of people on, is why am I feeling that? Where is that coming from? And then drilling down to where you first felt that. That helps you kind of get over those situations. And then, like I said, it doesn't make you very reactive. And like I said, it can blow the situation up a lot more. They also interact with their coworkers a whole lot better. You understand how somebody's feeling, helps things become more relatable, and then also end up leaning towards that empathy side.
And you really, from when we talked about in the first one, you use those as far as body language, their body cues, looking and seeing what they do with their hand gestures. Their you can really tell when somebody just shuts down.
Yeah.
And they don't want to either, be vulnerable, tap into their emotions, or express it because they don't feel safe. They're not going to feel heard. They're not going to feel seen. They're not going to feel that, I get the empathy.
Yeah.
They're not going to feel that. And so, so that would lead us into our empathy and how empathy helps with emotional intelligence. And we don't really have to live through the same situation to empathize. A lot of people try to use their imagination to really get into it or, empathize with a person. And the one thing I like to do is listen.
Yeah.
Listen.
No, that was one of those things too with emotional intelligence is you tend to listen a lot more than you talk. You don't speak near as much. One of those things that is kind of an acquired skill is the ability to listen. And if you do that, people will expose themselves. They'll talk about if you listen to what they put emphasis on, what they value, just by listening to people talk. You can just tell kind of where their headspace is, what's driving them, what's making them tick. So when you say the emotional intelligence is you listen a lot more, you can tell what kind of mood somebody's in or where their headspace is at.
Or what they're really trying to say, right? Like I said, they use, we're only taught certain words or certain emotions that we feel, but it is more beyond that. And I think if you explore that, you'll find that it's a different kind of emotion that they're feeling, and you'll understand and empathize with them a whole lot better. like I said, depending on the words they use and how they present it and all that good stuff. So, how to be more empathetic in an intelligent emotion is to listen more than you talk, use your imagination, put judgment aside, because they're not there to be judged. You're there to empathize with them, and that's a lot different. And, not using that against them later on.
Yes. Yep.
That is I believe that's a huge thing where a lot of people don't want to be vulnerable. Just the fear of having that being used against them later on.
Yeah. Having somebody weaponize what you're doing to use against them later is a lot of people's fear. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've had with some of the interactions that we've had online is, well, I don't want to put my business out there, because I'm afraid somebody's going to use that against me. Well, if somebody's using that against you, those are probably back to the people you don't want to surround yourself with or be around, because they're not, looking towards your greater good. If they're just wanting to emphasize, your flaws or the things that you're really trying to work on and improve.
Yeah, and if you put that towards, if you tie that with leadership, you will not be a good leader if you do that.
No.
You cannot be a good leader if you do that. You cannot be a good parent if you do that.
Yeah.
You cannot be a good spouse or a good friend or a good sister if you do that. So if you want to be a better, all those things, really understand not to use it against them later on. Don't judge them, with what they're going through. Really understand their emotions, and then, kind of sort of provide them what they need. They might just need an ear to listen. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah. So we've talked about, in the emotional intelligence, the self-awareness aspect, where we broke that down in the last episode. We're getting into more of the self-regulation, self-discipline side of things that goes into that. And then we'll finish up, with empathy, but we've already put some emphasis on how it helps with interpersonal skills, social skills, effective communication and things on if you understand how somebody is feeling, you also are aware of how you're feeling. That's what we're doing on communication, is to understand each other and not have those feelings overrule what that combo is, because that's usually what leads to a flare-up or a disagreement of sorts. And how that can help with our adaptability to situations. If we start to get overwhelmed by emotion, and then how that can help with conflict resolution, how that can, really just help from different situations going beyond our control, and really just speaking our authentic truth. Mm-hmm. So on the self-regulation, do you have some pointers or things that you do? I know we had, audience chiming in on the, count to 10. We've heard that taking some deep breaths. We'll have guys will say, go take a walk around the building, or, those that are smokers or vape, they'll go out and have a smoke, just kind of reset and come back in. It's in the moment, on the fly. Do you have some regulation tools or things like that you go through? I've got a couple that I just remind myself when I'm listening to that voice in the back of my head that is telling me to do the impulsive things. It's the voice that overpowers that and tells me not to. This is only temporary. It's just part of it. The thing that we use a lot is like, why is this happening for me? Is like, what do I have to learn on it? This is a test. It's this is only just a moment. Is one of those things that's really my go-to. There's things that suck, but as we've talked, there's also, even if it does suck, a lot of times it's necessary. So one of those things that you just got to kind of work through and figure out. And that's kind of goes back to your attitude and your reaction to things. That's you controlling that. And so that kind of aligns with my own self-regulation. The things that I do is, this is only temporary. It's part of the process. Mm-hmm. And work through it. I
think you nailed it for me. It really is everything that you said is, change that mindset. That's, for me, that's, like I said, on the last one, that's my most powerful thing, is my mindset. How do I think about this? Am I going to dwell on this?
Yeah.
If so, for how long?
Right.
Because also at the end of the day, I like to honor my feelings. So if there's an anger there, how do I let it do, what it's supposed to do, right? And then honor it, and then be like, okay, we're good. I've honored, the feeling. Let's go do something productive with it.
Yeah.
So it's for me to change that mindset and then to go to my common collective place, which could be driving, or it could go like I just go to a room, put some music on, and then do some photography.
Yeah. Give you something else to work on.
Yeah,
I like doing things, that get my head, into a different space as far as reading. I really do enjoy painting, not painting as far as artwork, but whether it's painting a room, some of the things that really you just have to focus on. Detail in the car, going out on a drive, meditating, working out is good. Going in and listening to a bike, riding a bike, listening to something, that's going to change my perspective. Spend really just kind of time away from stimulus, whether it's the situation, the person, the place, the whatever it was that brought about that feeling, to just getting away from cell phone, getting away from social media, getting away from a lot of those things, and just kind of recentering self, is one of those things. But in that moment, one of my go-tos is just, this is only temporary. This is this is necessary.
I think
work through it, get it done behind you, kind of like eating your vegetables when you were a kid, or so. It's,
I think as a parent, what I like to do, and this goes back to what is your personal value, right? So in a parent situation, if my kid, does something, and I get flustered with them, go do the step back, self-regulate, and then I hug them. It reminds me, like, okay, this is my kid. This is my child. Let me, and that really gives a good positive spin for me to go forward with it, because it's my kid. I'm not going to try to traumatize them in this situation, but let's both learn, because I am the adult. I'm taking responsibility. If I know self-awareness and emotions, I hold myself to a higher standard.
Right.
So it's taking that responsibility. For social skills, I love taking the feedback and giving feedback. And that helps me in that way.
Right.
Getting feedback with how people think about me, or, the tone that I set for, whether it be a team atmosphere or in a work atmosphere. Just say, when it comes to parenting, like on a game night, what kind of setting are you doing for game night? Is it more competitive, and if we lose and everything goes to, it's the end of the world?
Right.
No. If we lose, it's fine. We had fun. It's maintaining that positive emotion, even though that you lose. I mean, it's still fun, right?
Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. No, it's just about enjoying the company and the people that you're with versus the competition and getting too tied up into things.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all competitive to a certain aspect, and nobody likes to lose, but it's not just life, especially when it's a social thing with friends and whatever.
And getting that good feedback. Somebody might say your emotions got in your way.
Yeah, got the best of you.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, well, damn it.
Yep. So with self-awareness and situational awareness, we know our environment. We know how to reflect on our own emotions now. We've identified a lot of triggers. That's something that Janita spends a lot of time in, is when you do get triggered by something, is asking yourself why did that have that type of reaction on me? Why did that crop up? So those types of things are really important so that they don't overwhelm us in those moments. And then through self-awareness or self-regulation, we're able to manage and control our emotions in those situations. We're able to hit the brakes on those things before they take us too far where we're in a regretful state. Also, from, I guess, keeping us in the direction of where we are speaking our authentic truths and getting things out the right way. Mm-hmm. So what else do we got on here?
Self-regulations, it dictates our behavior, how we act upon it afterwards. It helps us decide how we're going to handle the situation. So self-regulating, right? So after that, you kind of, the reaction that you have expressed to the people. And so now self-reflection, self-regulation, now it goes externally. How do you, manage social or other people, team, family? And then from there, we really start to understand empathy, because it's just not about ourselves, it's about other people at this point. So you go from self a little bit outer, and then you go out. And then you have empathy. Empathy is to really understand the other person's perspective and feeling.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
is
To
we're
be able
gonna
to connect with them and put yourself in that other person's shoes to actually step into it. In the next segment where we get into empathy and what that looks like, we'll actually break down where a lot of people believe that they're empathetic when in reality they're just sympathetic. We'll go through some different examples of that and what actually empathy means and the different forms of empathy, because there's different types of it, from what most would say, well, that kind of borderlines sympathy, but to actually sitting with people and going through that experience, to be beside them. And that's what empathy means, is being able to come alongside with them and actually connect, versus the superficial part of a sympathy or I'm sorry kind of a situation. So with empathy, then you're able to understand another person's perspective a lot better. Like I said, just most commonly referred to as put yourself in the other person's shoes. And we do a lot of that through communication. So through consistent reflection, active listening, and then also doing some positivity, teamwork, considering and understanding each other. Really, we can experience a lot of great things with emotional intelligence. That helps build the camaraderie amongst teams, starts developing your staff members so they're able to regulate themselves better, and then they work with their teams, and it just multiplies what your vision is and helps everybody keep focused on the bigger picture. It really helps keep the grind of the work week, everything that we do, the monotony, helps keep a lot of that out when we're aware of it. And we're able to check in with ourselves and check in with our fellow coworkers, and just handle the day-to-day business in a way that's healthy for everybody, and it doesn't become overwhelming.
Yeah, agree. It really does bleed into almost everything in your life.
Yeah.
Like I said, all the way from leadership to parenting to relationship of all sorts.
Yeah. Lord knows in a relationship too, as far as you don't always see eye to eye. But it's one of those things that when you understand where it's coming from and how it's coming from, you're able to speak a little bit more intelligently rather than being emotionally charged and saying a lot of things that you probably shouldn't have said or should have been left unsaid. It helps you work more collectively, and it actually saves you a ton of time.
And how I like to describe it is people start putting their swords down.
Yeah.
Because they no longer, if you don't come in as a fighting and blaming, projecting kind of way, and you come in as an understanding with emotional intelligence, that helps a whole lot. And you see the other person just kind of put their guard down, and they're like, okay, this person really does care about me. And it kind of helps you build that bond, that trust, that relationship. When they're vulnerable, show that you can also be vulnerable with them, because the last thing you want them to do is suppress their emotions,
Right.
because that is like the pandemic of this this generation, this century, is depression.
Right.
And that's the last thing we want to do with everybody. So being them being vulnerable, you showing them that you can be vulnerable too, just strengthen the bond and get them to really express their emotions and understand emotions in that way.
Right. Yep. So yeah, you create that safe space, and that comes down to that listening skills, and then obviously not using those things against people. But through empathetic concern, the things that we'll break down in the next segment, emotional intelligence is incredibly important to help you read the situation, read yourself, read others. Really to use that towards your greater good, the bigger benefit of looking at the bigger picture. As a leader, as a manager, you have to see the bigger picture. But if you can get your other employees to see that and really break that down from a macro level down to a micro level of them understanding all of how it works, most importantly, how themselves work, really then they can start breeding that culture, breeding that kind of influence to everybody else, that it starts spreading like wildfire. And when everybody is aware of what they're doing themselves, how they're responding, how they're reacting, it cuts a ton of the bullshit out, and really everybody can streamline operations, communicate more effectively, know what each other is meaning, and better read the situation so things go as designed.
Right. And parent aspect, you are modeling this in front of your children. Right. So you're teaching them at an early point how to be all this. So when they get into that age of, in leadership work, they are already understanding all this. And that's an amazing tool to give them at a young age. Because, as we both know, is this really isn't taught in a way or explained in a way that they understand. So as a parent, this could really help them a lot. Not in your current situation, not only in your current situation, but in their future. It's a really, really good tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with what I deal in primarily is a lot of young men that didn't have a positive male role model in their life, and so therefore they don't know how to express themselves properly. It comes out as a lot of anger and aggression, passive aggressiveness, because they don't know how to communicate how or what they're feeling or even why they're feeling it. And it's because they've never had that demonstrated for them on how to do it constructively. So it just comes off as combativeness, that fighting, when really you start drilling down into it and how they can effectively communicate that and what they're feeling and why and where that stems from. It really starts breaking down a whole lot, and they're no longer viewed as being reactive or angry or pissy or moody or any of those other things, because now they're able to get that out.
And of course, relationship, right?
Yeah.
It really goes a long way when you really understand what your partner's feeling, and that partner feeling that they're validated. Like, oh, this person really gets me. And of course, it's not always romantic, right? It could be your sister, your brother, your mom, your father, your best friend, and that bond just can grow stronger, because you don't really want a weak bond with anybody. No, yeah, they don't last. So this can make you a better person all around in all aspects.
Yeah.
Just knowing and understanding this.
And not let situations or people get the best of you. They're not holding headspace, in your head, rent free. When people get the best of you or situations get the best of you, and things don't go as designed.
So I think that's all we.
That's a lot of the content that we had. Did we have any questions or anything? Anything you'd like to expand on, or anything that want clarification on?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. This one seemed a little bit fast too.
Yeah.
I think we're good. All
Thank
good.
you. All good.
All right. Well, do you want to go ahead and wrap it up?
Well, yeah. Well, we appreciate everyone tuning in then on part 2 of our segment. This is a 4-part series. The next one will be on empathy. We'll break down what that looks like and where a lot of confusion comes in between sympathy and empathy, how one is very simple and one requires energy and effort. We'll break that down in a really easy to remember way, as well as some different things that you'll be able to listen to and look at and say, hey, I've done that before, I've experienced that before. That's what that means, just to help with our connection from person to person. And then that'll lead us into our fourth segment after that, which is communication. So we've tied together self-awareness and then now emotional intelligence, and how that data stream, how that feedback, how we can use that to our benefit for ourselves and for others, and really how that makes us better situationally with social skills to business and interpersonal things. To, like I said, we'll go empathy and then wrap it all up with communication and how to use that effectively to tie the whole series together. So we'll see you guys next Sunday then at noon. We appreciate everything on there. Thank you guys so much. Stay blessed. Reach out if you have any questions or anything. Thank you.